The Detroit Lions in 2024 had easily the best season in their franchise history. Now, I know if you go back to the mid 50s and mid 30s, you'll come across seasons where the Detroit Lions as a franchise and organization won NFL championships. Since that point, the Detroit Lions have been nothing short than the worst franchise in the NFL outside of maybe the Cleveland Browns. So 2024, in comparison to the rest of these years, much, much better. 15-2 record, easily the best regular season in franchise history record-wise. They lose in the divisional round to Washington, 31-45. This was a team that by the end of 2024, the main reason everyone thought that they really didn't have as much of a chance to win the Super Bowl was because of their injuries. Namely, you have Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Alex Anzalone, among a lot of other really good players on this defense that either ended up on the injured reserve to end of the year or missed a huge chunk of games during the season. And it was in large part because of this incredible season that the Detroit Lions had in 2024 that they ended up losing both their offensive and defensive coordinators during the offseason this year. Ben Johnson going to division rival Chicago Bears and Aaron Glenn going to the New York Jets. Now, both of these guys have huge voids that will need to be filled by their successors, but I have a little bit of faith with the guys that they're replacing them with that they might not be able to be even better than they were last year, but they'll be able to be at least up to the same standard as they have been the last few seasons. Now, starting with why I think the defense is going to stay similar to how they were last year, even though there are some key losses that we'll get into later, it's because the guy taking over as defensive coordinator in 2025 is a guy that has been with this team for the last 4 seasons, Kelvin Shepard. Now, he's been the linebackers coach for the last 4 seasons with Detroit. He's been really key for guys like Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, and Malcolm Rodriguez, being very productive and very valuable players, not only on this defense, but as a team in general. Taking over on the offensive side is going to be John Morton. Now, this isn't just a guy who knows a lot of football. This is a guy who knows a lot about this football team. John Morton was the senior, offensive assistant on the Detroit Lions in 2022, which was the first year that Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator of this team. In that year, they were the number 4 total offense in terms of yards and the number 5 scoring team in the season that year. 2022 was also kind of the first year that the Detroit Lions really burst onto the scene as a really good team with a really good offense. Each of these guys are going to have a lot of talent at their disposal. Namely, on the offensive side of the ball, you don't just have really talented players, you have really talented young players that can still be molded into elite all-pro caliber talent. You have your Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, and other guys that were already on this team as well, like quarterback Jared Goff, who, make this team really elite and really special. And one of the few teams offensively where you can't really just choose one thing to stop, whether you want to stop the pass game or you want to stop the run game. You have to have the ability to stop multiple options on this Detroit Lions offense. And to be honest, there's not a lot of defenses around the league that have the ability to do it. Now, moving to the defense, this is where it's almost similar, if not even more talent is on this defensive side of the ball. They kind of just need somebody moving the chess pieces around to put them in elite positions. You have 2 defensive backs, cornerbacks, that you hope are the building blocks of your secondary for the next half to full decade of football. Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw last year didn't have incredible seasons. Ennis Rakestraw really didn't play that much. He got injured halfway through the season. Terrion Arnold, as a first-round pick last year, didn't have a completely breakout year as a rookie, but he still was a solid contributor on a good defense. But you also have Brian Branch. You also have Aiden Hutchinson. You also have Kirby Joseph. And you also have some of the guys I mentioned before, like Jack Campbell, Malcolm Rodriguez, and Alex Anzalone at your linebacker positions that are really valuable players again, not just to the defense, but to the entire team as a whole. The draft this year was also pretty good for the Detroit Lions in terms of keeping up with that mantra of having really good and really young, talented players on your team that you could hopefully mold into something special. Tyleik Williams and Tate Ratledge are pretty much status quo picks for the Detroit Lions as they've been coached by Dan Campbell the last few years. Addressing the front four on the defensive line, it was probably the most important thing to do. This was a team that got really no pressure against the quarterback, especially after Aiden Hutchinson went down with his broken fibula. There was pretty much nobody besides Zadarius Smith that you thought even had much of a chance to get after the quarterback. And that also was due to the fact that this team was really injured last year. You lost John Kaminsky for the entire season before the year even started. You brought in Marcus Davenport as a free agency signing from Minnesota, who you thought could be somebody at least as a rotational piece to get you 4 or 5 sacks. He almost missed the entire season. And so after those few guys and after Aiden Hutchinson, you really didn't have much. Now you bring in Tyleik Williams, who you hope can get interior pressure, who can be another piece alongside Aleem McNeil. And then you also get Tate Ratledge in the second round, who, in my opinion, was probably one of the better pure interior offensive linemen in the entire draft. You know, Will Campbell and a lot of other guys that were tackles that maybe looked like they probably fit better as guards. You know, maybe those guys had more talent and top tier, top end ceiling than Tate Ratledge did. But Tate Ratledge is he's a championship winner from Georgia. He's a really highly coveted player, in my opinion. And the fact that the Lions got him in the second round makes the fact that they lost Kevin Zeitler in free agency this year hurt a lot less than it could have if they didn't get him. Now, other than Kevin Zeitler, the really big loss that this team suffered through free agency this year was Carlton Davis signing with the New England Patriots. The best thing that you can say about this is that he went to an AFC team. You know, Carlton Davis was probably the best cornerback available, and because of that, he was one of the better defensive options available in free agency this year. He provided the ability to be, you could put him on the other team's number one wide receiver. He wasn't going to absolutely shut him down for nothing, but he had a good chance to make some plays, and that's all you can really ask for in a cornerback in today's day and age. Even with that said, the Detroit Lions replaced him with probably the number 2 cornerback option in free agency in DJ Reed, a guy who doesn't fit the exact same type of mold. DJ Reed is a smaller cornerback who plays more, he is not as much of a leverage user as I think Carlton Davis is, as one of those taller, bigger cornerbacks in the NFL. The Lions also bring in some decent players around the edges. You bring in Zach Cunningham, Rock Yassin, you bring in Roy Lopez, but also re-signing Levi Onwuzurike, Tim Patrick, and Khalil Dorsey. It wasn't a major free agency. You're not going to look at this team going from 2024 to 2025 and say through free agency this team has majorly improved, because they didn't. They pretty much stayed the same. But again, when you're a team this good and the other teams are going to want to poach your players from you through free agency, being able to sign good players and keep the ones on your team that you like, that's a really good sign for not only how the coaching staff is with this team, but how the front office is operating and how, as a whole, this team is keeping a championship pedigree together. Now, speaking of having a really good roster in front of you, looking at the offense for this team, we're looking at a team that, again, is going to be pretty similar to what they were last year, minus a few changes. You bring in Tate Ratledge in the second round, and he's going to slot in currently as the starting center for this team. You also have some other guys who are going to be in really important roles. Tristan Colon comes over from the Arizona Cardinals. He's not really a huge name in terms of, not everybody even knows the starting center for their own favorite team. So I'm not going to expect you to think Tristan Colon is a great signing as a backup center, but he's a guy who's played a lot of snaps in the NFL. You also have Christian Mahogany coming in as the day one starter this year for the Lions. That's at least how it is currently. if that changes before the end of the season, or before even the season starts, I wouldn't be that surprised. But this is obviously headlined by Penei Sewell on the offensive line, by Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and Sam Laporta with your skill group. And then you hope guys like Isaac Tesla, who you sign or you draft in the 3rd round this year, Tim Patrick, who you re-signed, you just get impactful years out of those guys. Defensively is where you want to see the major improvement. And the major improvement isn't really from just players playing better. It's from players staying healthy. You look at this starting lineup so far and who the names are that are there. A lot of these guys didn't play last year a lot of snaps because they were injured. Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, Marcus Davenport, Derek Barnes, even Alex Anzalone to an extent, Ennis Rakestraw. These guys all missed major snaps last year, and especially in the playoffs. Every snap is major on the defense, and those guys missed those games. So now you have hopefully a fully healthy roster. You slot in DJ Reed instead of Carlton Davis, which honestly I think is a little bit of a downgrade, but still, you went from the best corner available to the second best corner available in free agency this year. It's the guys that, it's Tyleik Williams, it's Malcolm Rodriguez, it's these guys that are going to be the second, third string players that really take this team over the top. Because when you look at the starters, they have really good players. They have really good talent on this defense. It's whether or not the reserves, if they need to get called upon to start games, or even if they come into the game as reserves, they need to be able to supplement and at least be at the same level as the starters were. Schedule-wise for the Lions, it's not going to be easy at all for Detroit. You obviously start off with a home game against the Green Bay Packers, then go to Chicago, and then host the Baltimore Ravens. Those are 3 games at the very beginning of the year. You easily could be 0-3 or 1-2. If you're 2-1 or 3-0, then you're looking at a really good season. But this is the type of start to a year where if it goes a little south, a little bit earlier than we were expecting, I really anticipate there's going to be some talk in the national media, which isn't always really, it's not really always the smartest talk. But still, there's going to be talk about this team if they don't have an incredible start to the season, because it only gets difficult and more difficult from there. You go on the road to Cleveland, you host Cincinnati and Kansas City, and then you go to Tampa Bay. Then you come back from your bye. You faced 2 teams last year that were playoff teams in Minnesota and Washington. Then you face the Super Bowl winner with Philadelphia. Then you end the season with the LA Rams, Pittsburgh Steelers, Minnesota Vikings, and Chicago Bears. Those are 4 teams who at the end of 2024 were, I guess Chicago doesn't really count, but 3 teams that were fighting for playoff positioning in 2024. And bringing the Bears back into the conversation, these are 4 teams who think they're going to be fighting for playoff positioning in 2025. So Detroit, throughout this entire season, from start to finish, is really going to have their hands full in terms of not only are they playing good teams, they're also going to be playing teams who are going to be looking to give them their best shot as possible. Detroit is coming off an incredible high that was the 2024 regular season. But they were a major disappointment in the playoffs. And it's kind of going to be the story of 2025 of whether they can not rewrite history, but make good on that disappointment. And so it's for that reason I kind of see the floor for this team as 10-7, 11-6, still double-digit wins, but you compare 10-7 or 11-6 to 15-2, there's going to be a lot of people saying that this team fell off from 2024. And while in some areas they might not be as great as they were in 2024, a little bit of a regression to the mean isn't going to be the worst thing in the world. Because I think that kind of means once the playoffs come around, maybe they'll actually have a chance to catch some teams off guard. Or they'll have a chance to actually put some stuff out there that isn't as expected. I think that was part of the issue going against Washington in the playoffs last year. Washington knew they had to play their best game possible to get a win in Detroit in that environment. And I think Detroit, after they had their start, they kind of had a target on their back. Now, ceiling wise, this team could win 13 or 14 games again, easily. But you do have those really tough games, like I mentioned. You have Kansas City. You have Baltimore. You have Green Bay, Chicago, and Minnesota. 6 games of your 17. I'm never just going to say, no matter who your divisional opponents are, I'm never just going to say that you can chalk up 6 wins in your division. If you lose 2 of your divisional games, you already matched how many games you lost last year. So, again, 13 or 14 wins, that should not be anything to scoff at when you're talking about the ceiling for this team. And even the floor, 10 or 11 wins, that's nothing to scoff at either. That's a really good season for a lot of teams.